Hey, Nick.
Hey KP, what's up?
Dude, I forgot to ask you actually. Was that UPS plane anywhere near you?
Oh, actually, yeah. I mean, it's very close to my house. It's like 2 miles from where I live. So crazy scene. Like I'm driving home from my office. I live probably 2 miles from the airport. Um, I get a text from my wife, and she's like, "Hey, something's burning near our house." And so like I'm driving home, and I see this cloud of smoke. It looked like a storm cloud, to be honest.
Hmm.
I'm like headed, right to my house in that direction. And I'm like, my first instinct is actually to check Twitter or X.
Yeah.
If you just type in and like search what's going on in a specific city, it's actually like really good. You get like live journalistic takes on
Yeah.
what's going on. And so I saw someone mentioned like it's likely a plane that's on fire, like within minutes of it happening.
Well,
But there was a period of time where you didn't actually like you just saw this cloud of smoke
yeah.
and you didn't actually know what had happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was obviously something significant. And then yeah, and then we had like a few alerts, like shelter in place, like alert text
Yeah.
messages going out. And we've got our 3.5-year-old and 1.5-year-old that are like, what's that, like what's going
Yeah.
on? But yeah, for those who don't know, there was like a massive UPS plane that crashed. Yeah, it was like, yeah, about a mile from my house. And it was the really sad part. So the engine caught fire as it was taking off, and then it was going to Hawaii. So the fuel,
It
it
was
was like
full.
25,000 gallons of fuel,
Yeah.
and that was what caused the massive explosion. So yeah, really really sad.
No, it's insane. It's interesting you brought up like you look on X to see what's going on. I think like minutes after it happened, the mainstream journalists knew about it, right? They're reporting on it, but they already had experts on because there was so much video footage
Yeah,
out there, and they even mentioned, they said, if this would have happened 10 years ago, like we'd be waiting to know what happened. But these folks were the quality of iPhone cameras now, they were able to zoom in. These experts were able to zoom into this, like, you know, uh, public journalism kind of videos out there, right? And they're able to zoom in and like, no, here's what happened. Like, oh, you can see this, and I was like, wow, it's pretty
mhm,
wild, right? Like
mhm.
within minutes, you had experts watching all this video taken off of iPhones and stuff, and they knew exactly what had happened.
Yeah, there's the meme whenever usually it's referred to whenever there's like a wartime event going on, but it's the meme is you're monitoring the situation where
Hmm.
you're just refreshing social media.
Hmm.
And the reason it's become a meme is because like the speed at which information comes at you during a very serious event like a war, like
Hmm.
for example, like I remember the Russia Ukraine war, the first day that
Yeah.
where Russia invaded, like it was like you're getting a lot faster information out of like live people on the ground
Mhm.
on something like X, like where where it's more like human, um yeah, it's just like live journalism from everyday people. And so yeah, it's become a meme, but like that it's a meme because like that's where you're getting most on the ground information today. The media is like probably 30 to 30 minutes to an hour behind it. And to your point, a lot of the imagery is that the media is reporting on now is directly from that source, like that boots on the
Mhm.
ground source, which just like kind of changes the whole, yeah, the reporting and news landscape. It's pretty fascinating. But yeah, but like very obviously, the for me, I was getting my information not from the news, but from like just querying in X
Yeah.
Louisville. Yeah, fascinating.
Not to go down a rabbit hole. So what's mainstream media for then? I mean, seriously, like, we had the elections this week. I wasn't tuning into CNN, or I was just like on X, like, who won, or on the internet, who won.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. I'm done. Right.
I,
Like
I
I
think
don't need to know more than that versus watching CNN, the commercials, and then just repeating the same thing, right? Like, we're here covering this story, and it's like, great. Like, you haven't told me anything new. That's fantastic that you're there. Like,
Yeah.
just tell me something.
I think it's they're clearly a secondary source. And I think it's for a generation of people, like my parents, for instance, they're watching the news because that's their trusted outlet. Like they don't have that same relationship that we do with
Mhm.
I'm trusting and I know how to use I know how to find a credible source
Right.
when I'm on a social media platform. And their first instinct is not to go to the social media platform. It's like to tune into the local news.
Mhm.
Um, because they haven't found that trusted, credible, fast source where like me and you can quickly get onto Twitter and X and query, whatever's going on, whether it's in Russia,
Mhm.
Ukraine, or Louisville, Kentucky, and quickly assess and read the trust layer of like, is this a credible person or not? Is this a
Right.
credible video or not? And I
Yeah.
think that's a new wrinkle like in the modern age where videos can be fabricated and information is widely available. Like there is a skill like where you can quickly detect whether or not someone's trustworthy or not. And I
Yeah.
think like we've seen so many reps
Yeah.
that we can figure that out and can trust someone like that has no followers on the internet when they're producing something.
Yeah, it's interesting as we dig into this rabbit hole. So I don't know if you heard about like at Disney World, there's been 4 deaths in the last 30 days.
I have not heard that.
Yeah. Um,
Wow.
2 I think were suicides. I
Really?
think something like that. But was interesting, all the early reports were just so fake. It was like someone got run over by a monorail, someone fell out of a like it was all like, and it was all coming off of X, right? And it was, I think someone had heard that there was a death, but there was no, because it's Disney World, like it's its own country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's under NDA.
Yeah.
Right? So nobody's leaking like what actually happened. And sometimes they don't know. Like the person went to the hospital and died. They don't know what the cause of death is or anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So of course, there was all this speculation on X, including like pictures, like, oh, here's video footage
Yeah.
of the person getting run over by the monorail. To your point, though, right? If your parents were on X, they might have been like, did you hear?
Yeah.
Someone at Disney World got run over by a monorail. Oh, Mickey Mouse murdered someone. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
because people without any knowledge, I mean, that's the bad part of the internet is if there are no facts,
Yeah.
I think like Twitter to me is like half the time it's just funny because people are just so creative and so quick witted
Mhm.
with memes or now
Yeah.
with AI videos.
Yeah.
Here's a video of Mickey Mouse stabbing a, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
But your parents wouldn't know. They'd be like, oh, did you
No, they
hear?
wouldn't be. They
Mickey
wouldn't
Mouse
be able to
murdered
tell.
somebody.
And for what it's worth, that's a good counterexample to my point, where it's like
Yeah.
there would be no way for me or you to verify that either. And I think like what you see in those early moments of a big situation where you're checking social media, you do see rampant speculation when it hasn't been verified. And in that moment, there's no way to know or trust the outcome of what happened,
Mhm.
or trust the speculation on what actually happened, but you can trust that something did happen,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like I remember, like when Charlie Kirk got shot, very obviously the video came out. Like I'm sure most people listening to this saw the video, super
Mhm.
graphic. Like you see him get shot, and immediately there's speculation on like whether he's alive or dead, right? And in that moment, you don't know.
Right.
Who's verifying that? Like we just don't. I mean, we don't
Well, no.
know. I mean, you can guess because it was a very violent event, but the two other events like that really stand out in that respect would be Charlie Kirk and Donald Trump getting shot. Like those are moments where on social media, like it was very clear that the world was watching there versus
Yeah.
any other location, and you're getting like real time, like second by second update where you needed to refresh your feed when they're like hunting down the killer and they're trying to figure out what happened and
Mhm.
who's alive and who's dead, right? Like, where else do you look? Because the media certainly isn't getting a shot at that.
No.
You're getting it from people in the audience.
No. And at some point, someone's gonna start hacking into police body cams, and you're gonna have, like, literally footage
Yeah,
running somebody down.
it's nuts, crazy.
Yeah. So what do you wanna chat about today?
Get a riveting topic.
Is this a hard pivot?
Yeah, hard pivot. So the topic is when board members are out of scope, or for people who are not familiar with private startup boards, basically, like, what are the rules of the road when you're forming
Yeah.
a board, if you're participating on a board, if you're in and around the hoop and investing in something where there is a board, like what is the definition of a good board makeup? What's productive? What's not productive? And we've just had a lot of, I think with our recent deal activity, we've had a lot of reps both participating on boards and watching them get formed. I even think back to like when we first, when we started the first fund, like our early involvement in boards and even our own education on what a startup board in particular should look like and be comprised of, I think is probably very different than what
Yeah.
we thought years ago. But yeah, that's the topic. I think.
You know what though, Nick?
Yeah, sorry.
I think we could expand it to boards in general. I was speaking at this AEC conference in Napa, and one of the sessions was on board makeup for like an architecture and engineering, like an AEC firm too. And so I think we can talk about that too, because I think it's also fascinating how that's quite honestly being done very poorly. I have not. The only boards that are interested, I think, are being done well in AEC was when private equity is involved, but private ones are done really poorly.
Why do you think private equity makes boards improve? Like, what do you think the dynamic is there?
I think it's experience, right? They just like for us, right? I mean, if you think about it, how many investments have we made? I always say we're north of 25 now, right? And how many deals we just have
So
so many
about 30.
reps, right? We have so many reps. We sit on boards, we're observing on boards. I've been on public board. I mean, we at some point you develop some pattern recognition around what works and what doesn't work. And so I think the private equity people, they're no different than us. They see a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're the CEO of a structural engineering firm and you don't really sit on any public boards or anything else, and all you know is your company's board, you don't know any better.
Let's start with what makes a bad board.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen that contributes to a poorly performing board?
Much like anything, like just like the lack of engagement. Don't show up. When they show up, they just hang out. I'd prefer a highly vocal, over emotional board member than one that just kind of sits there and doesn't really do much of anything. I think that lack of interest. What do they say about marriages? It's like when you stop fighting, it's the problem. Like if you're fighting, your marriage is probably going to be okay. It's when you're not fighting and when you're not engaged, right? It's the lack of engagement at all is probably the beginning of the end of a marriage kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it applies to boards too.
Yeah. There's I shared this with you earlier, but there's a book on this topic that Brad Feld, a pretty famous VC, has written. And I think it's literally called Startup Boards, but I think most of the rules, to your point, apply to any general board structure. And my big takeaways from the book, I think, are that as the CEO, the founder, or even if you're participating as a common shareholder,
Mm-hmm.
so to any founders and C-suite execs that are participating on boards, it's a it's a proactive thing that you can control in terms of your board performance, and you should want to spend time and work hard to form the right board. And
Mm-hmm.
so less of a, hey, let's do a favor to this person, let's just accept this board seat because this investor wants to invest. More about like what is like start with the question, like what is the right composition of my board? Like what help do I need? What advice do I want? What skill sets are we missing as a team? I think like just generally the mindset and the attitude needs to be, hey, what is the best possible composition of the board to support where we are as a company and our specific needs?
Mhm. No, I think it's that. I mean, I think where a lot of founders get caught up is there's the governance perfunctory aspect. I think we've had this conversation several times lately, like about founders saying, "Oh, I don't want my board to be too big." Like, okay, well, why not? Like why and why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
Right. Um, Also, the transition from maybe co-founders being on a board to when does one drop back to be the observer?
Yeah.
That's another kind of interesting conversation to have, right? And what I always love is when there's co-founders and each of them call me individually to let me know that the other one should probably drop off the board. You know, because they're doing a round and it's like, oh, we're gonna have to give up a board seat, and they're literally calling me like to tell me that the other person's probably not the best fit for the board.
Let's do a three-way call.
Yeah, it's like just get on a phone, guys. Let's just get on the phone and figure it out. Like, geez.
Yeah, that does happen. Yeah, I think the like to play back my own question to you on what makes a bad board, definitely inactive, unengaged people. We see it most when a startup is not performing amazing. They could be performing
Mhm.
okay, doesn't
Yeah.
mean they're failing. But for VCs, the incentive structure is, of course, to spend the majority of time with your breakouts in your
Mhm.
portfolio. So like the power law math and venture comes into play here too, where it's like we do have with 30 companies, we have a limited amount of time to devote, whether it's in board matters or any portfolio support, to non-performing companies that are going to essentially return any money to us, right? So if
Yeah.
it's unclear after a period of time that is the case, that's where you see VCs and just investors in general start to kind of phase out and not be as engaged. I think generally speaking, whenever an investment is placed and there's a board role, like there's a honeymoon phase,
Yeah.
and so the job of the founder is like, one, I think, to build a think of your board as a team.
Mhm.
You have to work to keep the chemistry right on the team. In person board meetings, for instance, really help with that. You can do
Mhm.
dinners, you can do, you spend time with people. Face to face really does matter. I think in a world of Zoom, and like it is hard to build a great board team that has a lot of other duties. Like if we're on
Yeah.
10 other boards and we're doing our own stuff, like how do we engage and find chemistry with the other members? Like pretty hard to do if you're meeting once a quarter.
Yeah. Oh, I will tell you this. There's a couple of boards I've dropped off of because they've raised their next round and whatever. And I tell the founders, like, look, I'm still around, right? I'm still an investor. I'm still around. Ping me if you need something, right? Which I think that's where the dynamic changes. Um, with as many companies as we have, when I'm on boards, it's not so much that I feel any different sense of responsibility or anything like that. It's just that once a quarter, I'm getting 3 hours with the founder. They're presenting everything, so it's just top of mind, right? It's just top of mind. That's all it is. But I'm on a couple boards right now where one of the board members is now the fourth from the organization. It's like become this like, oh, somebody needs to be on that board because we wrote a check, and so it's every quarter, every year, twice a year. It's like you have to explain to someone what the company does, and they have no idea. I have another one where it's when I clearly the other investor doesn't believe this investment's going anywhere, and they have an analyst on the board. Nothing wrong with analysts, but they have an analyst on the board, which I don't have a problem with an analyst being a board observer to learn or whatever, but to be on the board, which what does that tell you, right? It tells you that they've kind of already written off the investment and that kind of thing. Um, so I think that the unengaged. I think the second thing that I've seen is people not understanding that it's a startup. I've seen these corporate folks, especially when there's a strategic investment. There's a board I'm on right now that has a strategic investor of a big company on the board. And man, do they focus on all the wrong things.
Mhm.
Like, let's review the meeting minute. I'm like, you don't need to be on the board meeting to have the board minute. Like, you can read the board minutes before you come to the board meeting, right? It's like
Yeah.
this is precious time to really get a group together to problem solve whatever problems and challenges the startup's having. And you spend 45 minutes on administrative stuff. It's like that's not what's important, you know?
Mhm.
Or I've seen board members that come from big companies that just have an unrealistic understanding of the resources of a startup founder and the company. So they say things. I was on a board one time, and the guy's like, "Well, what you need to do is hire the guy, salesperson that looks like this, and it'll only cost you like a $500,000 a year. It'll be great. It's easy." And the founder's like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, that's not realistic. We're not, yeah, I'd love to hire that person. Not going to happen, right?" And so all their ideation around troubleshooting whatever challenges were going on were just all highly unrealistic. Just go, things like just go raise some more money. "Oh, okay, cool, cool. Like, yeah, just go raise more money, like just like that, right?" you know. So I do think that that's another second dynamic is just like people that are highly qualified on paper, but are not qualified to be on a startup board.
What are the attributes and signals that you've seen that signal a great startup board?
I think either people have some really deep functional area, right? Like they're really good at marketing. They're really good at sales, like really, really good and understand it and you're almost getting a very expensive consultant for cheap, right? Um, as companies grow, it's kind of interesting when my company went public and we kind of reformulated the board. We had someone that had been like the former VP of HR at some company. I'm like, why do we have this person on here? I mean, it was like a name brand company. I was like, why do we have this person on here? They don't know what they're like some startup guy, right? Like, what is this person doing there? That person ended up being the most valuable person on the board.
Mhm.
Because at that point in my career, I thought of HR as just being like running payroll and benefits. Like that's what HR is. But he was so good at understanding like the culture and understanding the people and how to recruit and when to fire and how to deal with HR issues, right? And mitigate and just all the things like as a founder, you're not when you're trying to hire at scale, when a founder you're hiring onesie twosie, maybe using some recruiters. But we were 1,200 people, and I was still trying to run it like it was a 20-person company. And I think I was like shocked by how valuable I thought that was. But it's during that season of time that type of skill set's very valuable. I think for the world that we live in, I think board members have like three jobs, right? Help with recruitment when needed. So they have to have a network. Helping with customers, they have to have a good network, and helping with follow-on investors, they have to have a good network. So, and I think we can say like have a good network. That doesn't mean having a 500,000 Twitter followers, but I think people that have good networks, that have credible networks, tend to. There's a reason why they have credible networks, right? It's not because they're a bunch of schmucks.
Mhm. Mhm.
But to your point too, I think it's a founder's job is to be very clear on what their expectations and why that person, here's why you're on the board, right? Here's why I want you on the board.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm going to, have you responsible for. I think there's something that public company boards do well. I don't know how to scale it down to startup boards, but you have committees. You have a compensation committee, you have an audit, and there is something to there's something to be said about having that focus of like hey, you're really good at the details and finance. You own reviewing the board deck for the finances as a board member, right? I think the way we kind of do team ball on boards, it's like, great, everybody's on the board and everybody's involved with everything, which means there's probably some things that people are missing, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things to call out related to, I guess, yeah, this is I was going to say startup boards, but I guess this applies everywhere. Is, there's this dynamic of being in the business and then out of the business, right? Whereas like if you're the founding team, like you're living and breathing this thing every day, like you can read the board report in your sleep because you're reviewing these metrics every single night. For your board to get up to speed, it does take time, right? To review a 40 a 40 slide board deck every quarter and really study it and understand actually what is happening in the business. I think there's two ways to do that. One, you give your board ample time and set expectations for how they can get up to speed. But two, I think just like regular check-ins, when I think of boards that I'm on, where I'm clear on what's going on, it's because there's like I'm getting calls from founders and other board members about particular situations that are happening in real time, not just we're going down a checklist during the board meeting and reviewing them in a 2-hour session once a quarter, right? So there's this dynamic of how do you keep your board engaged on a biweekly or monthly cadence with really important issues. And I think, I mean, just from my experience, like the best way to do that is literally just pick up the phone. It's not like, it doesn't need to be a formal thing. With some of our companies, I have regular recurring meetings where we just check in, and some weeks there's nothing to talk about. Other weeks there's a lot to talk about. It could be a board meeting in and of itself, but having something on the calendar that we can just commit to, catching up, has been something that at least has been effective for me. But I think that is like a thing that I've noticed that you need to solve for, is like, how do you get your board members into the business a little bit more often?
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think for us, especially when we're on the boards, we've gone through, we got pitched, we've gone through diligence, we've spent so much time with folks. It's kind of like we know the business pretty well, right? I do think there's another thing that, and we had a call earlier today, and I was just like, look, I try to optimize for, is the founder spending their time on the right things, right? Versus like, let's review it's like budget reviews, I think, are fascinating. This is when you have like a very corporate person on the board and like, yeah, we need to review and approve the budget. I'm like, you mean that piece of fiction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not that productive, really, right? It's really not that productive. How they allocate their budget. It's like, if they don't allocate their budget in the right way, they're going to run out of money. Like there's nothing, the founders, it's kind of built in, right? It's not like a big corporate. But I do think really understanding, because I do think for founders that are day to day doing whatever, just running, for once a quarter, to meet with the board, and the board to really kind of understand like what the founder's been working on and how they've been, spending their time and optimizing their time for what benefit, I think is like, because I've been on boards where I'm like, you did what? Like, you have 3 months of cash flow, cash left, and you were busy recruiting someone. Like, what are you doing here? And sometimes founders get kind of caught in la la land, right? They're like, no, dude, like you need to be focused on fundraising. Like, what are you talking about? But they just, if they're not good at fundraising, maybe they're avoiding it. I'm not sure what they think sometimes, but yeah, I think there's a benefit of having structure. I've had board members. I've been on boards with some kind of corporate people, and like, it's so disrespectful that the founder sent us the board deck 2 days ahead of time. And I'm like, I don't get disrespected. my view is if you don't get me your board deck early enough, I don't have time to provide any real value. So when you ask me like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I'm like, "Yeah, fine, whatever." You didn't give me time, right? You didn't like you're not going to get the best out of me if you don't give me the time, right? It's I don't feel disrespected. like if,
Yeah.
it's like you lost your opportunity, right? You're getting 3 hours with me and a bunch of other people that hopefully kind of been there, done that, know what they're doing, and you just like pissed it away because you waited till the night before to send out a board deck.
Yeah. One, I think there's a, you're talking about like when a company moves to a later phase and there's like a lot of governance activity happening where it's like, hey, we're approving minutes and we're approving, the budget and we're, having a lot of financial conversations. I think so I have two follow-up thoughts there. One, I have seen there are companies in our portfolio that have not effectively made the transition from being a scrappy pre-seed seed stage startup to a series A or series B startup in terms of organization and
Mhm,
and structure and like where this, where this is evidence is, or where you see this live is when a company is raising money and they don't have any of their documentation in order. For instance, like you got to get approval on that, on that $1 million safe you raised. You got to have signatures. You got to have like your company docs in order. And when that stuff is out of order, and you're like trying to raise a meaningful step up in terms of in terms of cash size, and you're trying to raise your next series of financing, and it's like a more sophisticated group of investors, that's a signal in a lot of cases that you're not ready to take that step. And
mhm,
so I do think there is like when a board is all about governance, huge problem.
mhm.
When basic organization is not being conducted and
That's
you're
a problem.
moving into later phases, that's also a problem. And I think there's like there needs to be um I think just recognition that boards are an evolution and things are changing over time, and that you do need to get your house in order as you move, out of the pre-seed and seed. And while, yeah, you don't want to spend any of your time talking about budget and minutes and
Mhm,
some of the boring stuff, your next series of investors do want to see that you have organization. And I mean, I'll just tell you, like, there's a few deals we've worked through recently. It's kind of night and day with the signal it sends when a founder is on it. Everything is perfectly documented.
mhm,
They're not scrambling, and in a diligence cycle and getting back to you 5-6 days later, with really basic documentation or answers that you would
mhm.
expect them to know. They don't have to go call their counsel and spend money on that. Like having that stuff in place matters. But to your point, if you're only talking about like high level governance and you're not solving the most critical problems of your business with your most trusted group of advisors every quarter, you are not doing boards right.
Don't you think that applies to every part of the business though? Like I would argue that if you treat board function like any other operations, right? It's like, yeah, early days, maybe you're running on QuickBooks and you're doing your own books. You don't have a controller and CFO. But then the business evolves and you need a controller and maybe need something other than QuickBooks. You know what I mean? Like early pipeline is on a spreadsheet and later on you need a CRM and you need a process and methodology. So maybe what you're kind of even saying is that how a board operates and board functions and governance needs to evolve just like the rest of the business evolves. It's like another functional group in the business that needs to be taken just as seriously as, hey, we can't, you know, run our entire sales pipeline off of Google Sheets. We need some,
Mhm.
we need more process to it, or accounting or whatnot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's 100% true.
So maybe it's that functional area that founders don't really spend enough time really, you know.
I've been um I've been going down a Larry Ellison rabbit hole.
I'm
Are you a fan? Have
a
you?
huge fan of Larry Ellison. You know why I'm a huge fan of Larry Ellison is I love competition. You know how I am. What I think you just found out the other day that one of our
Your
former
nickname?
colleagues, Anastasia, used to call me Petty Reddy.
Yeah, I found that very funny. I did not know that.
Yeah, because I'm just such a competitor. Like I just hate losing. I hate all of it, right? Just tears me up, right? And but Larry Ellison, I know, is from back in the day when it was him, Larry Ellison versus Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And Larry Ellison was
I've studied this a little bit. Yeah.
like samurai
The
bro, right?
feud
He was
is
like
awesome. Yeah.
studying martial arts and
Yeah.
like his office was a dojo. Like it was just very much that. And then you had like super nerd Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
And
Who, by the way, like he characterizes as an absolute killer. Like,
yeah.
yeah, like he, there's a biography on Ellison that talks about his interactions with Bill Gates, and he came back from I think it was like an hour-long phone call with him when they were more on consistent speaking terms, and maybe were more partners early than they were adversaries.
Mhm.
That switch flipped later, but he had like an hour-long conversation with Bill Gates, and Bill Gates, he came out of it and said he has zero sense of humor,
Mhm.
like the most impossible to interact with him, and like as a person who values like lighthearted humor, Ellison's like, I can't interact with him.
Mhm.
Um, but the other thing is his ego is so small. They talked about a really specific issue that Larry Ellison got heated about related to like a Microsoft integration or something.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Hey, Larry, hey, Bill, I think here's how you fix the problem. Like you're not thinking about it right." So
Mhm.
Bill hung up and said, "All right, let me think about it." He called him back 5 hours later, and he said, "You know what, Larry? I think you're right. I thought and I thought about it, like here's how I would architect the solution." And Bill Gates played it out like 4 to 5 chess moves further than Larry Ellison had expected. And he's like, "Wait, Bill, did you just think about this problem all day? Like, did you just go in a hole and think about this problem?" And he was like, "Yeah, it was an important problem." And in that moment, he realized that Bill's ability to drop his ego and not win the argument, but to win the long-term game was
Mhm.
better than any CEO that he had ever interacted with.
Wow.
And like that attribute is like when you look at Microsoft, what is
Mhm.
Microsoft great at? They're great at execution. They never invent, they never innovate. They're
Mhm.
always the fastest to copy a great feature. And that
Mhm.
attribute is what Bill Gates' biggest strength is, which is like he knows he's not going to invent it. He's not the most creative. He's not the most original, but he's like a killer engineer
Mhm.
and he's a killer operator. And if he recognizes a feature is going to be great, he can
Mhm.
drop his ego and just say like, "Hey, let's just go build it."
Yeah, that's wild. No,
Um,
I'm a big
but any-
Larry Ellison fan.
yeah. So anyway, the rabbit hole is going down. So Ellison, he, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's like a lot to be said about, about his strategy. But the other thing he used that feud for was publicity, right? Like the dojo and the office makeup. Like the press was loving it. They would give Oracle so much coverage, and they were the underdog here.
Yeah,
And so he rode that as far as he could.
especially in tech, right? Like if you think
Yeah,
about it, at that time, these weren't it's not like now. Like now you have all this like cult of personality stuff that goes on in tech. That's just a bunch of nerds, right? We're all the people that no one wanted to talk to in many ways, right? Like, what are they talking about? You know? So no, it did create good fodder, so to speak.
yeah. I think another board topic that I think is relevant to hit on. I think there's like a really basic rule. Like if you're a founder or you're a chairman of the board or CEO of a company that's running a board, I think like what's your level of excitement interacting and going to board meetings? Like to me that's a really basic test of if you have the right chemistry in team and if people are actively engaged in the right way. And if you don't, like why, right?
So here's my thing, right? For most of the boards I'm on, by the time I always tell my founders this, if I get to the board meeting and learn something new, like shame on you, right? Because I'm on, I mean, I don't know, I'm probably 100 text messages a day. I mean, there's always, and that's what I want, right? It's not like I want my founders, I want them to learn something on their own, maybe the hard way, but generally I don't want them to. It's like, hey, we're trying to negotiate this contract. Like, why didn't you text me? Like, just, and so I think because I am so open and accessible, I feel like shame on them if I show up to a board meeting and I don't already know what's going on, right? So the board meetings I generally despise have more to do with the other board members. I feel like they're wasting my time. I don't learn anything from them. They don't add value. There's one board member, it's just like every board, like I already know what's going on, right? I already know what's going on. But I know what I can say to get them riled up. And then I'll say something, get them riled up, and then go off camera because then it's like I'm being entertained. But outside of that, it's just like most of them, it has everything to do with other board members, very little to do with the founder. And I think what drives me insane, besides like not being entertained, so to speak, is that they show up and they ask dumb questions. They don't add any value. There's one board I'm on where the board observers are very, I'm not even sure why he's there. Like he's not an investor, but from a big venture firm. And he's like so smart. And I just learned so much from him every time we have a board meeting. I look forward to it. Right. So I think it's very rare that like whether I'm excited about going to a board meeting has anything to do with the founder or the business. It has to do with the other board members.
How do you, as someone who cares about a company, is on the board, is loyal to the company you're serving, how do you affect a change, or or talk to the founder about fixing the board structure and maybe that member who's not actually adding any value?
Yeah,
Can you?
it's hard, right? I mean, you can only coach, right? You're not in the game. You're a coach. Um, I'll kind of there's two things I'll say. It's like, hey, like where you're at in the company, you might want to think about a board member that can offer more support around these areas, right? Fundraising or whatever's going on in the business. So I try to make it about that, less about that person. Hey, that person isn't any good. I try to make it more like, hey, I think you might have outgrown that person, or what you need now is this type of person. So I try to usually position it that way. Um, Sometimes I've had to just say like, hey, this person is just borderline incompetent. You need to do something about it. The other thing I do is really to try to prepare them for their next round. Like, look, on the next round, here's what the board needs to look like, you know, and I'll put myself in the bucket whether I should be involved or not in the next after the next round of funding. So I usually try to position things that way a little bit. But I think there's also an interesting dynamic. We have a situation with one company that's raising a round, and they've asked me to like step off the board because the new investor wants a board seat, blah blah blah. And I have no ego about being on the board. And I said, like, just so you know, this new investor that's coming in, there's a really good chance they're going to fire you. And he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, like I know the type. I know the type, right? That they're like, hey, you didn't execute. We're gonna fire you, and I'm gonna be the new CEO. Because I've seen this I've had it happen several times. You and I are never vying to be CEO of any of our company. You know what I mean? We're not on the board nuking the founder because we want the job. Like that's happened never at Shadow Ventures. It's never happened, right? But I have seen it happen a lot. And I, you kind of know the personalities, like the type of things they're asking for and all that. And he was like, really? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, how do you feel about that? I'm like, honestly, if he can do a better job than you, I'm an investor. I don't know that, you know, I don't know that I have a strong opinion, but if this person, you know, does a coup d'etat on you and gets you fired and can run the business better, then like I don't know that I have to have an opinion, right? It's at that point. And he was just like, really? I'm like, saying like that's the reality. Like maybe, and so I think there is an interesting tension between, hey, you're the CEO, and yeah, you might have some control stuff and all to keep your job, but a board that's not challenging you to do better and like earn your job every quarter, I think is also is also problematic. I mean, I think you have to be supportive, and we're usually small investors, right? We're not, we don't own 50% of the company or anything. But I do think some founders get very um, like, would you rather have someone smart that's going to be questioning your abilities, or would you rather have someone dumb that thinks everything you do is amazing?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is to get better over time, right?
Yeah. I had a board member once who was a McKinsey partner.
Mhm.
Oh my God, what a jerk. They just beat the crap out of me at every which way. Right? We're raising around and he's like, I'm like, it's taking longer. He's like, you know why it's taking longer? Because you're not putting a deadline on people. That's why it's taking longer. If you don't put a deadline on people, they won't commit. And I'm like, well, I think if I put a deadline on them, they're just all going to say no. Right?
That's always the fear. Yeah.
Right. But man, like, it was just brutal. Like, I still don't like him.
But he made you better.
But he made me better. I still don't like him. He made me better though.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the coach or the manager, the CEO that is relentless, sometimes an asshole, but pushes you every single day. And it's really, whether the relationship survives or not depends on your ability to deconstruct and, remake yourself when you get really harsh critical feedback, right? I think it's like, yeah, I think it's like fairly obvious that you want someone who's going to push you and make you better, and you don't want someone just like, being a yes man in every single meeting. I think you want to have people who are critical and can think objectively.
Mhm.
I don't think you want someone who's just like generally adversarial.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful to be pushed, and it's helpful to have to be heavily critiqued and basically shown a mirror every single quarter. I think that is a helpful thing, especially for founders who don't get that very often from their team.
Yeah. I agree with you. I need to run, but I think that this is a good topic. I think it's also a great topic for people because I think we started publishing this on Substack. All of a sudden, I'm a Substack fan.
You're obsessed.
I'm all about Substack lately. But I think this would also be a good thing if people want to put comments in Substack or wherever they're watching this. I'm sure there's comments. We usually have comments on. It could be a great one to do maybe in a couple months again after people give us some feedback. Because I don't think it's an everyday thing. It's just like there's like wartime, peacetime CEOs. I think there's wartime, peacetime boards.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, this should probably be a topic we talk about regularly than just like once and done.
Should have a board meeting every quarter on the topic.
Yeah, there we go. We'll just, what we'll do is we'll just do like anonymous readbacks of all our board meetings. It's also funny. I also recognize that most of our founders listen to this. I don't know if you know this, but because they'll ping me and be like, "Were you talking about me?"
Yeah, of course.
Of course. I'm like, "Yeah, I was. Get your shit together."
Yeah.
All right, man.
See ya.
Until next time. See you.